The moment you realize someone's words are not about you, something shifts. At first, it's subtle. A comment on your work, a whisper of judgment, a public critique designed to provoke. You feel the familiar surge of tension in your chest, the instinct to defend, to explain, to retaliate. Your mind races with rebuttals, imagined confrontations, and the pressure to assert your worth. The words sting, not because they carry truth, but because your attention has given them power. And in that split second, the choice appears. React and feed the chaos, or stay silent and reclaim your ground. Silence is not mere absence. It is deliberate, strategic, and almost imperceptibly powerful. When you refuse to engage, when you refuse to validate the critic with your energy, you begin to separate yourself from the narrative they attempt to write. The world is filled with voices, loud, persistent, often cruel. Most surrender to them, their sense of self shredded by constant validation seeking. But silence allows something else, a retreat into clarity, a reclaiming of attention. It is an act of subtle resistance, a quiet assertion that your mind is yours and yours alone. Imagine a crowded room where voices clash in a chaotic symphony. Someone directs a sharp remark at you, designed to pierce your composure. Every instinct urges reaction, yet you remain still, composed. The critic expects movement, expects energy to feed on. You give none. The energy returns to you. The tension in your chest eases. You observe without judgment, acknowledge without attachment. Others notice the calm, the quiet authority. It is not that you are stronger than they are. It is that you are no longer participating in their game. Marcus Aurelius understood this principle, though in different terms. He faced criticism, betrayal, and public scrutiny, yet his power never came from shouting louder or defending himself to every detractor. It came from controlling his perception, managing his response, and preserving his inner peace. To respond to every critic is to concede that they hold influence over your mind. Silence, in contrast, removes that concession entirely. It is a battlefield won without firing a single shot, a war ended by calm, by presence, by the simple refusal to participate. The psychological mechanics are subtle but profound. When you respond, your brain releases adrenaline, engages fight or flight, and reinforces the critic's hold over your attention. Each reply, each defensive post, each attempt to clarify only strengthens the cycle. Silence disrupts this loop. It interrupts expectation. It creates space where reflection, observation, and strategy emerge. The critic grows restless, frustrated, confused. Their energy, once directed at you, dissipates. Meanwhile, you conserve your energy, your focus, and your dignity. But silence is not easy. It is counterintuitive. Your mind screams, urging you to act, to prove, to win in their terms. The temptation to speak is strong, often irresistible. Yet within that restraint lies growth. You learn patience. You learn the value of observation over reaction. You discover that the world's noise need not dictate your inner climate. Each moment of refusal strengthens this discipline, forming a habit that reshapes how you approach conflict, criticism, and challenge. Internal tension builds at first, a storm within your chest. You imagine every possible rebuttal, every clever retort. You feel exposed, perhaps weak, perhaps passive. But gradually, the tension loses its edge. You notice your thoughts are no longer hijacked. The critic's voice is distant, diminished, inconsequential. Your mind, once scattered across the battlefield of opinions, finds calm. Perspective returns. You see the critic for what they truly are, a reflection of their own limitations, insecurities, and projections. This is not just theory, it is lived experience. Consider the person in a workplace, relentlessly undermined by gossip and judgment. Those who lash out quickly burn energy, attract more criticism, and lose focus. Those who employ strategic silence, however, maintain composure, preserve authority, and gradually command respect. The power of silence is cumulative, compounding like interest in a financial account. Every unreacted provocation deposits more control, more clarity, and more presence into your life. And so, silence is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is mastery. It is a statement: your mind is yours. You will not allow its contents to be dictated by every passing voice. You will choose carefully what deserves your energy. You will conserve your focus for creation, for thought, for growth. The critic may speak endlessly, but their words fall harmlessly against the shield of your restraint. You remain untouched, powerful in your stillness, untethered from chaos.
The day begins like any other, yet beneath the surface, a storm brews. You check messages, notifications, and social media. A comment catches your eye, a careless remark from someone intent on undermining you. The familiar heat rises in your chest. Your fingers itch to type a response. Your mind rehearses the perfect retort. Every instinct tells you to fight, to defend, to assert that you are right and they are wrong. But you pause. The pause is not hesitation. It is intentional. You inhale, feel the tension, and allow it to exist without giving it power. Silence is your first act of rebellion. It is not passive, not empty. It is deliberate containment of energy. The critic wants a reaction. They crave validation. By refusing, you redirect the narrative. Every word you could have written is no longer a bridge to their chaos. You feel the release of attention, the reclaiming of focus. There is a subtle shift in posture, in breathing, in presence. A quiet authority emerges that is invisible, yet unmistakable. Those who observe notice it instinctively. The calm person in the storm carries a weight no shouting can emulate. Internal monologue becomes your playground and your tool. Do they even matter, you ask yourself? What do their words control? My perception? Only if I let them. You replay the exchange mentally, dissecting the motive behind the words rather than reacting to their content. You see the projection, the insecurity, the ego driving their criticism. The revelation hits with a quiet force. Their attacks are not personal. They are reflections of what they cannot reconcile within themselves. And this understanding liberates you. Every interaction now carries a choice. Will you give life to negativity, or will you conserve your energy for creation, reflection, and mastery? As this awareness grows, you notice a subtle but profound effect. People attempting to provoke you begin to lose momentum. Their words seem weaker, less precise. The tension you once felt at every jab diminishes. You no longer anticipate confrontation. Instead, you anticipate clarity. The mind, once scattered and reactive, grows disciplined, deliberate, and focused. This is the invisible victory silence provides. Consider the psychological toll of speaking to prove yourself. Each rebuttal releases stress hormones, increases mental fatigue, and reinforces the critic's hold on your attention. You are a battery feeding their fire. Silence flips this dynamic. By not responding, you conserve energy, retain focus, and slowly create a buffer between yourself and the chaos of external judgment. The more you practice, the more automatic the restraint becomes. You realize silence is not merely a pause. It is a structural reorganization of attention, a redirection of life force toward what matters. The scene shifts. You are walking through a crowded urban street. Conversations clash around you, opinions fly, whispers escalate. Some glance at you, trying to provoke, to elicit a response. You remain still. calm. Each unspoken word reinforces presence. People feel it, though they cannot name it. There is tension in the air, as if the city itself is noticing your control. The mind trained in silence does not panic. It observes, absorbs, and calculates with precision. The external chaos becomes a background hum, a low-frequency noise that no longer disturbs the clarity of thought. This mastery extends to every layer of life. In meetings, in social interactions, in the digital landscape, silence becomes armor. Others react with frustration, misunderstanding, or even aggression, but the power lies not in their reaction, but in your restraint. Every unreturned insult, every ignored criticism, every withheld comment builds your authority. Others may try to undermine you, but the space you occupy, mentally, emotionally, physically, remains untouchable. The critic, deprived of a reaction, becomes irrelevant. Yet silence requires cultivation. Your mind rebels at first. Impulses scream for validation, for defense, for justice. You feel the compulsion to react as if ignoring it is cowardice. This is where internal dialogue and discipline intersect. You remind yourself, the critic's power exists only if you acknowledge it. The words, however sharp, are empty without your engagement. In this moment, silence becomes a conscious decision, a deliberate form of mental training. Each choice strengthens the neural pathways of restraint, focus, and strategic awareness. Even in solitude, silence exercises its effect. Alone with your thoughts, you replay previous attacks not to argue, but to dissect, analyze, and learn. You separate fact from projection, criticism from malice, judgment from ego. What once would have provoked anxiety now becomes material for reflection. Silence transforms the chaotic energy of external voices into internal clarity. The mind, freed from reactive cycles, expands. Thought becomes precise. Creativity flourishes. Calm becomes a habit, not an exception. By the end of the day, the transformation is subtle yet undeniable. You have not spoken, not defended, not engaged, but you have emerged stronger. The critic's words have no weight, their attempts at provocation dissipate, and your mind remains intact. Silence, once difficult, now carries power, authority, and freedom. It is a tool, a weapon, a shield. And as the sun sets, the internal landscape is quiet, rich, and alive with potential.
The more you encounter criticism, the clearer it becomes that most attacks have little to do with reality. Words are hurled like arrows, but the target is rarely truth. It is your reaction. Toxic critics thrive on attention, feeding on your energy, hoping to elicit defense or anger. Each reply, each post, each verbal retaliation hands them the power to dictate your emotional climate. But when you stop responding, when you refuse to validate their attempts, the cycle breaks. Silence becomes your invisible armor. Imagine a meeting where a colleague disparages your project. The room freezes for a moment, expecting you to respond. The old you might have launched into defense, your pulse quickening, words spilling in frustration. But now, you remain still, eyes steady, expression calm. Internally, you dissect the words. This is projection, insecurity masquerading as critique. The critic is performing for their own validation, not offering insight. By withholding reaction, you maintain control, not just of the situation, but of your own mind. Walking through the city, notifications ping endlessly. Social media posts, messages, offhand remarks, they all pull at your attention, demanding engagement. The instinct is strong.
defend, correct, justify. But silence transforms the landscape. You observe without participation. The barrage of opinions becomes white noise, inconsequential. Each unspoken reply strengthens your focus. You notice that those who continue their attacks grow agitated, confused, exhausted. Their energy leaks, while yours consolidates. The hidden mechanism is psychological. Responding triggers fight or flight, elevates stress hormones, and reinforces the critic's influence over you. Silence interrupts this pattern, preserving energy and fostering composure. With repetition, restraint becomes automatic. The mind that once scrambled to respond now evaluates, analyzes, and chooses deliberately. Attention shifts from external drama to internal clarity. By refusing to react, you reclaim authority over your perception and over your life. This is not avoidance, it is a strategic decision. Each unreturned insult, each ignored provocation, adds weight to your presence. Others sense it, consciously or not. The calm figure in a storm draws respect, curiosity, even quiet admiration. Those who shout or attack reveal only their limitations. Those who remain silent signal mastery. The power of restraint is subtle, but it accumulates. Time becomes an ally. Critics diminish as your focus and authority grow. Even alone, the practice reinforces itself. You replay events mentally, not to argue, but to learn. You differentiate projection from reality, judgment from fact, opinion from truth. Criticism becomes a tool for reflection rather than a source of stress. The mind expands, creativity surfaces, and calm becomes a default. The world's noise loses its grip. By mastering silence, you master the internal environment that critics seek to invade. The subtle victory is compounded. Whereas reaction depletes, silence enriches. The critic's energy dissipates. Your energy accumulates. Control shifts back to you. The mind, once reactive, becomes a calm reservoir of potential. Each encounter with toxicity reinforces the principle. The less you feed the chaos, the stronger you become. Silence is not emptiness. It is a concentrated form of power, patience, and internal freedom.
To break silence never fully disappears. It lurks in the corners of your mind, whispering, "They're wrong. You should respond. You must defend yourself." That voice is relentless, fueled by pride and the illusion that every opinion about you holds weight. Yet the more you indulge it, the more energy you surrender. Practicing silence requires constant awareness, a vigilance that becomes second nature over time. It is in these moments, when the mind screams for action, that mastery truly takes shape. Picture a scenario, an online debate where insults fly like daggers, laced with sarcasm and hidden derision. Others jump in, defending, attacking, amplifying the conflict. You watch, but you do not participate. At first, it feels unnatural, even weak. Your fingers hover over the keyboard, a million replies rehearsed in your head. But you resist. Seconds stretch into minutes, and a strange clarity arises. Without your engagement, the noise begins to fade. Others' energy dissipates into emptiness, leaving their words hollow. This restraint is not passive. It is active, intentional, a conscious redirection of focus. While others react, you observe. You analyze motives, detect insecurities, and identify patterns. Every criticism becomes an object of study rather than a trigger of emotion. You are no longer a participant in their game. You are the observer. With time, this perspective reshapes not only interactions with critics,
but your entire approach to life. Decisions are no longer reactionary. Thoughts are deliberate. Energy is conserved. Consider the psychological payoff. Each act of silence reinforces neural pathways that prioritize self-control over impulse, reflection over reaction. Stress decreases, focus sharpens, and emotional resilience grows. You feel an internal expansion, a liberation from the tyranny of others' judgments. Where once your mental landscape was scattered, it is now organized, disciplined, and clear. Silence becomes a force multiplier, enhancing not only your perception of others, but your command over yourself. Real-life application magnifies the effect. In professional settings, a colleague's attempt to provoke can be diffused entirely by restraint. The tension remains in the room, but your composure signals authority. In social circles, gossip loses its sting. Online, trolls are rendered irrelevant. This is not luck, it is deliberate cultivation. Each moment of withheld response strengthens presence, focus, and credibility. Critics may persist, but they cannot erode what you do not surrender. Internal monologue is crucial. You remind yourself, the critic's power exists only if you acknowledge it. Words are inert until given weight. Silence transforms confrontation into observation, chaos into clarity. Over time, this mental discipline extends beyond critics. It becomes a habit, a lens through which all challenges are filtered. Energy that would have been spent reacting is now available for creation, strategy, and personal growth. By the end of each encounter, the subtle victory is evident. You are not just unshaken, you are enriched. The critic's attempt at disruption fails. Your focus is intact. Your internal environment, once vulnerable to external noise, is now fortified. Each silent act compounds, reinforcing mastery over perception, emotion, and attention. This is the essence of strategic silence. The deliberate choice to let the world rage while you remain unshakable. The quiet assertion of control over your mind and the invisible accumulation of personal power. Criticism often feels personal, but beneath the surface lies a pattern: flawed thinking, insecurity, and the human tendency to project inner chaos onto others. Toxic critics unconsciously seek to manipulate perception, forcing you into reaction. The hidden cause is rarely the words themselves. It is your attachment to them. Every time you care too much, every time you respond, you grant power to a voice that does not deserve it. Understanding this is the first step toward liberation. Consider a workplace scenario. A colleague undermines your ideas, inserts subtle digs, and questions your competence. You feel a familiar mix of anger, frustration, and doubt. Without the discipline of silence, these feelings escalate, clouding judgment and steering decisions. With silence, a transformation occurs. You observe, you assess, you distinguish between fact, perception, and projection. You notice patterns. When they feel insecure, their attacks intensify. When they are confident, they step back. By refusing engagement, you reclaim agency over your perception, disrupting the cycle. Internal monologue becomes your greatest tool. Their words are reflections of them, not my reality, you repeat silently. Each repetition reinforces the boundary between your internal world and external noise. The mind, once scattered and reactive, begins to align with clarity and purpose. Every unspoken response builds resilience. You are no longer trapped in the cycle of proving worth. Instead, you focus on growth, creation, and mastery over your own narrative. Flawed thinking patterns are central to burnout from critics. We internalize judgment, replay it endlessly, and allow external voices to dictate self-worth. Silence interrupts this process. By refusing to validate the critic, you break the loop of self-doubt. You create a space for reflection, for measured evaluation. The energy that would have fueled conflict now fortifies creativity, focus, and discipline. Each silent moment compounds into a larger internal structure of strength, a fortress built from patience, restraint, and insight. Philosophical insight reinforces this practice. Marcus Aurelius wrote about controlling perception and maintaining internal stability, regardless of external chaos. Critics cannot touch the part of you that remains unmoved. They cannot erode calm that you have chosen to cultivate. Silence embodies this principle, converting potential conflict into a tool for mental fortification. What others say matters only if you allow it. Silence removes that allowance entirely. The mastery of silence is also a lesson in priorities. Energy is finite. Every response, every defense is an expenditure. Critics demand attention. Silence preserves it. Each withheld reaction strengthens focus and internal authority. Life becomes clearer. Decisions sharpen. You no longer wander through conversations and social spaces reacting impulsively. Instead, you act deliberately, choose battles strategically, and protect the most valuable asset, your mind. The transformation is cumulative. Initial attempts at silence feel difficult. The instinct to react is powerful. Yet with repetition, restraint becomes automatic. Critics lose influence. Your energy consolidates. You experience freedom from the tyranny of external judgment. Each encounter reinforces the principle. The quieter you remain, the louder your presence becomes. The world's noise diminishes, and the internal landscape grows rich, organized, and fertile with potential. The first true test of silence often comes when the stakes are high. A message arrives late at night, a comment dripping with malice or disguised as advice. The instinct is immediate: reply, defend, clarify. Heart racing, thoughts scrambling, you feel the pressure to act. But now, restraint is not optional. It is the tool of mastery. You breathe, observe, and refuse engagement. The mind, once hijacked by impulsive reaction, begins to settle into a quiet authority. The critic waits for a response, but none comes. And in that absence, the first subtle shift occurs. Control returns to you. Internal dialogue becomes sharp, deliberate. Do their words define me? Do they dictate my worth? The answers emerge slowly, each unspoken reply reinforcing clarity. You understand that validation cannot come from others. It is cultivated internally. Silence transforms fear, anxiety, and anger into observation, analysis, and perspective. The mind that once burned with reaction now expands with calm. Each moment of restraint is an exercise in self-mastery, a deliberate reallocation of mental energy from chaos toward focus, reflection, and creation. Consider a social gathering, crowded and noisy. Whispers about your choices, criticisms of your work, subtle digs and glances abound. Each insult or judgment is designed to elicit a reaction. You feel the tension, the familiar itch to defend. Yet silence becomes your shield. Your posture shifts subtly, shoulders steady, expression composed. Internally, you dissect the intent behind words, identify projection, and note patterns. The critic's energy dissipates in the absence of engagement. Their attempts at disruption weaken, while your presence consolidates. Psychologically, silence interrupts the fight-or-flight loop. Responding releases stress hormones, activates impulsive thought patterns, and reinforces the critic's perceived influence. By withholding reaction, you conserve energy, reinforce calm, and strengthen internal authority. Over time, restraint becomes instinctive. The mind, once scattered across multiple provocations, now focuses sharply on priorities, goals, and self-growth. The power of silence accumulates quietly, imperceptibly, yet irrevocably. The philosophy underpinning this practice is ancient. Marcus Aurelius spoke of the importance of controlling perception and guarding the mind against external disturbance. Modern critics, whether in person or online, operate under the same principle. They cannot touch the part of you that refuses engagement. Silence is not avoidance, it is strategic mastery. Each unspoken response is a reinforcement of mental sovereignty, a declaration that your attention and energy are yours to control. In moments of practiced silence, internal tension gradually diminishes. You notice subtle shifts. Thoughts are clearer, judgments more precise, emotions less reactive. Critics continue their efforts, but their impact wanes. You are no longer participating in their performance. The quiet authority you cultivate becomes magnetic. Others sense it, even subconsciously. Respect grows not from argument, not from proving yourself, but from the deliberate choice to remain unmoved, present, and focused. By the end of these encounters, a profound realization emerges. The mind's freedom depends on attention. Each moment of unbroken silence preserves it. Each withheld response reinforces it. Energy is no longer lost in pointless conflict. The world's chaos becomes background noise. The critic's voice fades in significance. And as you move forward, the first mindset shift solidifies. Power lies in restraint, clarity lies in observation, and freedom lies in choosing silence over reaction. Days pass, and the rhythm of silence becomes familiar. Critics continue their attempts, but their energy feels hollow. You no longer anticipate provocation. Instead, you anticipate clarity. Each unspoken response reinforces a subtle but profound truth. The world's noise has no claim over your focus. Internal tension eases as observation replaces reaction. Your mind, once fragmented by the incessant need to defend, now aligns with purpose. The critic's attempts, once overwhelming, fade like distant echoes. Imagine a heated online debate. Comments pile up, mocking, accusing, questioning. Others respond, escalating tension and spreading chaos. You observe silently. Your attention is intact. The critic grows frustrated, miscalculates, and eventually dissipates, their energy exhausted. You feel the quiet accumulation of strength. Each unengaged provocation becomes a deposit of calm, clarity, and focus into your mental account. Whereas engagement drains, restraint empowers. Each moment of silence compounds, shaping a new identity grounded in presence and self-mastery. Internal dialogue sharpens. Do they control me? Only if I allow them. You replay interactions, dissect motives, and separate projection from reality. Criticism becomes a lens for insight rather than a trigger for anxiety. Patterns emerge. Those who attack most aggressively often harbor the deepest insecurities. Understanding this removes the sting. Observing without reaction allows mental energy to redirect toward creation, strategy, and deliberate action. silence becomes a tool of precision, shaping responses not through words, but through composure and control. The psychological effect deepens with practice. Fight or flight cycles weaken. Impulses to argue, justify, or defend diminish. Calm becomes default. Each unspoken response reinforces self-discipline, reshaping neural pathways. You notice subtle social shifts. Colleagues, peers, and observers sense authority without confrontation. The critic's efforts are ineffective, their attempts to provoke meaningless. What they cannot touch, the quiet, resilient mind, is your domain. Each moment of silence reinforces this invisible boundary, fortifying mental autonomy. Real-life scenarios reinforce the principle. A team member belittles your work in a meeting. A family member mocks your decisions. A social media post invites judgment. The instinct is always to respond. The practiced silent response transforms these encounters. You remain composed, focus unbroken, energy preserved. The critic, deprived of attention, becomes inconsequential. The world's opinion loses its hold over you. The mind, once reactive and scattered, becomes deliberate, strategic, and calm. Philosophical insight aligns with this practice. Marcus Aurelius emphasized mastery of perception and internal stability over reaction to external events. Silence embodies this principle. Each withheld response is a deliberate assertion. Your mind is yours, your energy is yours, and your clarity is untouchable. External criticism cannot penetrate unless permitted. Power lies in this restraint, authority in this composure, and freedom in this mental sovereignty. By the close of each day, the compounding effect becomes evident. Your energy is intact, focus sharp, and attention fully yours. Critics continue their attempts, yet their influence diminishes with every silent choice. The first mindset shift solidifies. Restraint empowers. Observation clarifies. And silence reclaims the space within your mind that external chaos seeks to occupy. The world continues its noise, but you remain unshaken, deliberate, and in control.
The first true transformation occurs when silence becomes instinct, not effort. It is no longer a tactic, but a habit, woven into every encounter. You notice a subtle shift in how the world responds. Words meant to provoke no longer find purchase. Criticism slides off like water from polished stone. Energy that was once consumed by defense now flows into thought, strategy, and creation. The mind, once reactive, becomes deliberate, intentional, and expansive. Each interaction strengthens this emerging identity. A close friend offers a veiled critique. Your immediate reaction, years of conditioned reflex, wants to justify, to correct, to defend. Yet you pause. You feel the tension, the surge of adrenaline, but do not act. Internally, you analyze. Their words are theirs, not mine. Their projection does not define me. Breath slows, posture steadies, and awareness sharpens. By refusing to react, you reclaim attention and mental energy. The critic's power diminishes, and your presence grows. Everyday scenarios reinforce this mastery. A coworker undermines your ideas in a meeting. A stranger online posts an insulting comment. A family member questions your choices. The instinct to reply is strong, yet silence transforms each encounter into observation. You notice patterns, motives, and insecurities without engagement. The critic, deprived of response, loses momentum. The calm authority you cultivate becomes increasingly perceptible, not through words, but through composure,
restraint, and unshakable focus. Internal monologue reinforces growth. Do their words alter my path? Only if I allow them. You replay encounters mentally, separating projection from fact. You internalize lessons without consuming energy in fruitless defense. Silence becomes not absence, but strategy, a deliberate allocation of focus toward creation, reflection, and self-mastery. Each unspoken reply strengthens the neural pathways of restraint, focus, and psychological resilience. Over time, reaction becomes automatic. Observation replaces impulsivity. Calm replaces agitation. The psychological payoff is immense. Stress diminishes. Emotional clarity emerges. Attention sharpens. Your energy, once scattered across multiple provocations, consolidates. Critics, though persistent, cannot erode the internal fortitude you have cultivated. You move through life with deliberate intent, responding not to chaos, but to opportunity, not to insult, but to purpose. Silence is the tool that shapes the mind and preserves autonomy. Philosophy underscores this transformation. Marcus Aurelius wrote that mastery of perception and control over internal life shields one from external disruption. Silence embodies this principle. Each withheld response is a declaration. The critic's energy no longer dictates your emotional state. Mental sovereignty is reclaimed with every pause, every refusal to engage. Power lies not in confrontation, but in restraint, not in reaction, but in deliberate presence. By the end of each day, subtle yet undeniable changes appear. The world continues its noise, critics continue their efforts, but your response is composed, deliberate, and measured. The second mindset shift solidifies. Silence is not emptiness, but authority. Observation is not weakness, but power. Restraint is not limitation, but liberation. Through practice, the quiet mind becomes unshakable, focused, and free, impervious to the chaos of external judgment. A sudden message interrupts your evening. The tone is sharp, condescending, intended to provoke. In the past, such words would have ignited anger, anxiety, or the urge to justify yourself. Now, you feel the familiar surge of adrenaline, but instead of reacting, you pause. You allow the words to exist without granting them power. Internal dialogue surfaces. These words reflect them, not me. I choose where my energy goes. Breathing slows, posture steadies, and focus returns to your priorities. Walking through your city, you encounter subtle jabs and casual criticisms. A stranger comments on a choice. A colleague remarks sarcastically. A friend questions your judgment. Each instance offers an opportunity to practice restraint. The old reflex, to explain, argue, or prove, is met with deliberate silence. You observe motives, identify projections, and note patterns. The critic's energy weakens, their attempts at disruption dissipate, and your calm authority consolidates. With every unspoken response, mental space grows, focus sharpens, and internal power accumulates. Internal monologue reinforces the shift. You replay each interaction, not to argue, but to analyze. Projection, insecurity, and ego become visible, and words that once felt personal now appear hollow. Your energy is conserved and redirected. Thoughts become deliberate. Creativity flows. Decisions are guided not by external judgment, but by clarity and purpose. Silence transforms reactive impulses into strategic awareness. reshaping the internal landscape into a place of calm and authority. Consider a meeting where a colleague challenges your proposal aggressively. Others anticipate conflict, but you remain composed. You observe body language, tone, and motive without engagement. The critic seeks to elicit a response. The silence becomes an invisible barrier. Internal dialogue guides reflection. Their opinion does not define my path. The tension in the room shifts subtly. Your presence, composed and deliberate, creates influence without confrontation. Power manifests quietly, without words, yet its impact is unmistakable. Psychologically, each act of restraint retrains the mind. Fight or flight responses weaken. Stress hormones recede. Neural pathways strengthen for observation, patience, and clarity. Critics' attempts to provoke lose potency. Energy once wasted in conflict is preserved for creation, strategy, and personal mastery. With repeated practice, restraint becomes instinctive. Silence is no longer effort, it is natural, automatic, and deeply empowering. Philosophy reinforces this approach. Marcus Aurelius emphasized control over perception and the cultivation of inner stability. Words, insults, or judgments cannot penetrate unless permitted. Silence is the embodiment of this wisdom. Each withheld response asserts ownership of your mind, reclaims authority over attention, and strengthens internal freedom. Power lies not in confrontation, but in restraint, not in speaking, but in choosing when and if to speak. By the end of the day, the effects of sustained silence become evident. Critics persist, but their influence diminishes. Your mind, once reactive and fragmented, is now deliberate, calm, and strategic. Energy consolidates, focus sharpens, and emotional clarity deepens. The third mindset shift emerges. True authority comes from internal control. True power from deliberate restraint, and true freedom from the choice to remain silent while observing the world. Weeks of deliberate silence begin to produce subtle but undeniable changes. You notice a shift in interactions. The once aggressive colleague tempers their tone. The social critic becomes less persistent, and the murmurs of judgment lose their sting. These external shifts reflect an internal evolution. The mind, once reactive and scattered, now operates from calm authority. Each encounter strengthens focus, reinforces clarity, and preserves energy that was previously squandered on reaction. Picture a scenario. An online thread erupts with personal attacks. Others respond immediately, their emotions laid bare, arguments escalating. You observe silently, reading motives, detecting insecurities, and identifying patterns. The temptation to respond flickers, but restraint holds. By not participating, you neutralize the intended disruption. Over time, this pattern repeats itself across situations. Energy that would have fueled conflict is now redirected to creation, reflection, and strategic thought. Silence becomes the engine of mental sovereignty. Internal dialogue anchors this transformation. Their words are irrelevant unless I grant them relevance. This mantra shifts perception from victimhood to mastery. Criticism no longer triggers stress or anxiety. It becomes data for analysis, insight for understanding human behavior, and reflection for self-improvement. The world continues to shout, but the quiet mind remains unshaken. Power grows invisibly, accumulating with each deliberate pause, each unspoken rebuttal. Real-life application magnifies the effect. At work, Meetings once charged with tension become platforms for calm observation. Social interactions previously fraught with judgment now unfold without disturbance. Online, the constant barrage of opinions loses its ability to provoke. Each silent moment fortifies the internal environment. The critic's attempts to impose chaos are rendered ineffective. You operate from a position of authority, presence, and strategic awareness, reshaping how the world engages with you.
Psychologically, this practice rewires perception. The habitual reflex to argue, justify, or defend diminishes. Emotional clarity emerges. Attention consolidates. Energy stabilizes. You no longer expend mental resources on external chaos. Instead, they fuel personal growth, creativity, and deliberate action. Silence is not emptiness. It is the active cultivation of power, patience, and presence. Philosophy frames the discipline. Marcus Aurelius emphasized controlling perception and internal response as the path to freedom. Words, insults, or judgments cannot touch you without consent. Each act of restraint asserts ownership of your mind, fortifies internal authority, and expands the space of mental freedom. Over time, the mind that once reacted impulsively now operates with clarity, focus, and intentionality. By the end of these weeks, the transformation is tangible. The noise of critics diminishes, their attempts at provocation fail, and your internal landscape flourishes with calm authority. Mindset solidifies. Energy is your currency, silence your shield, and deliberate observation your weapon. True mastery is not in reacting, but in controlling where attention, focus, and emotion flow. Months of disciplined silence begin to reveal its deeper impact. Interactions that once triggered agitation now pass by almost unnoticed. You observe with clarity, noting patterns of behavior, motives hidden beneath words, and emotional undertones without disturbance. The mind, once reactive and scattered, has been reshaped into a calm instrument of perception and decision. The critic's attempts to disrupt are no longer threats, they are data points. Each moment of restraint compounds internal authority, focus, and psychological resilience. Imagine a high-stakes situation. A client or superior issues harsh feedback publicly, testing patience and composure. Others bristle, respond defensively, and escalate conflict. You remain silent, composed, and analytical. Every word they speak is absorbed as information, not fuel for reaction. Internal dialogue guides observation. Their anger reveals need, insecurity, and projection. It is not mine to carry. Energy once lost to conflict now fortifies thought, strategy, and presence. The critic's power wanes, while your authority grows quietly but undeniably. Internal monologue becomes a constant stabilizer. I respond only where it matters. I act only where I control the outcome. Silence reinforces autonomy. The mind that once recoiled at criticism now approaches it with clarity and discernment. Each encounter teaches subtlety, patience, and deliberate focus. Reacting impulsively is no longer the default. Instead, observation, measured analysis, and strategic action guide behavior. Energy is conserved, attention sharpened, and mental clarity expanded. Social dynamics transform. Friends, colleagues, and acquaintances notice composure and restraint. Conflicts that once escalated collapse quietly. The critic, deprived of attention, loses influence. The quiet authority you exude is magnetic. Presence replaces argument. Observation
replaces confrontation. Over time, habitual silence becomes a defining trait, signaling mastery not through volume or dominance, but through deliberate calm and unshakable focus. Psychological transformation is profound. Fight or flight responses diminish in intensity. Emotional clarity and resilience strengthen. Energy once expended in reactive cycles is preserved for creation, reflection, and growth. Neural pathways solidify around deliberate attention, strategic thought, and measured observation. Silence is no longer a tactic. It is the foundation of mental power, the quiet engine of focus, and the unshakable source of personal sovereignty. Philosophical perspective reinforces this shift. Marcus Aurelius taught that perception governs reality, and internal control shields from external chaos. Critics, insults, or judgments cannot penetrate unless allowed. Each deliberate pause is an assertion of authority, a reclamation of attention, and a reinforcement of mental freedom. Over time, silence reshapes life itself, creating space for clarity, growth, and sustained resilience. By the end of this stage, a new internal paradigm emerges. The critic's attempts are predictable, their influence wanes, and the mind thrives in deliberate stillness. Mindset solidifies. Reactive behavior drains. Silence empowers. Observation clarifies. Restraint preserves. Control over attention and energy is the ultimate victory.
At this stage, silence ceases to feel like a restriction. It becomes instinctive, a natural rhythm woven into daily life. The mind, once scattered by constant criticism and social pressure, now moves with deliberate clarity. Each interaction, whether with a colleague, friend, or stranger, becomes a testing ground for mastery. Critics still speak, but their words no longer penetrate. You observe, process, and decide internally, preserving energy for what truly matters. A long-term scenario illustrates the transformation. At a meeting, a senior figure challenges your proposals aggressively. Others react immediately, defensively, creating tension. You remain composed, absorbing each word without internal disruption. Internal dialogue reinforces perspective. Their judgment reflects their own state, not my value. By observing silently, you understand motives, detect insecurities, and anticipate reactions. Your responses, when necessary, are deliberate, precise, and measured. No energy is wasted on proving worth. Power lies in composure and focus. Internal reflection grows sharper. You replay past interactions, identifying points where energy was lost to reaction. You recognize patterns of projection, insecurity, and misplaced priorities. The mind that once burned with reactive impulse now navigates situations strategically. Emotional volatility diminishes. Mental clarity becomes the default state. Criticism no longer dictates attention or self-worth. The internal landscape expands, fertile with focus, creativity, and decisive action. Social dynamics subtly realign. Observers sense the quiet authority you project. Colleagues respect, peers notice, and even critics feel the diminished influence of their attacks. Presence becomes your statement. Silence, once a defensive tactic, transforms into active mastery. Decisions are made from clarity, not impulse. Energy is allocated to creation and growth rather than fruitless conflict. The critic's attempts, though persistent, gradually lose all relevance. Psychologically, each act of sustained restraint rewires perception.
Neural pathways strengthen around observation, patience, and deliberate action. Emotional responses recalibrate. Stress and anxiety that once accompanied criticism are significantly reduced. Attention is fully owned. Energy, once scattered, is consolidated into focused thought and purposeful behavior. Silence is no longer a tool. It is the foundation of authority, freedom, and mental power. Philosophical insight reinforces the practice. Marcus Aurelius emphasized control over perception and internal stability as the true source of power. Critics, insults, and judgments cannot touch the mind that has learned restraint. Each deliberate pause reasserts ownership of focus, fortifies mental sovereignty, and expands the space for intentional thought. Life, once disrupted by noise, becomes a domain of clarity and measured action. By the conclusion of this transformation, the identity shift is profound. The mind, disciplined through silence, emerges as a fortress. Critics' words no longer define reality. Emotional equilibrium becomes default. Focus is preserved, energy consolidated, and internal authority absolute. Mindset solidifies. True mastery is silent, deliberate, and strategic. External chaos only holds sway when allowed, and freedom lies in choosing what to engage with and what to let pass. The culmination of months of disciplined silence is subtle yet undeniable. Internal storms that once erupted at every critique now pass like distant weather, noticed but unperturbing. You recognize triggers before they take hold. Words that once provoked anxiety or irritation now dissolve into observation. Each interaction reinforces the identity you have cultivated, composed, deliberate, and internally sovereign. The mind has shifted from reactive to reflective, from controlled by chaos to guided by purpose. A challenging scenario demonstrates the depth of this transformation. A trusted colleague publicly questions your judgment, framing it as incompetence. Others bristle, ready to defend or escalate. You breathe, observing body language, tone, and intent without reacting. Internal dialogue guides analysis. Their anger is projection, not a reflection of my worth. Energy that would have fueled confrontation now strengthens creative thought and strategy. The critic's influence wanes, while your quiet authority deepens. Silence has become both shield and instrument. Internal monologue sharpens, rehearsing insight and reinforcing calm. I am not the product of their opinion. I respond only where I hold influence. Each act of restraint strengthens neural pathways for focus, clarity, and deliberate thought. Emotional equilibrium stabilizes. Attention, once fragmented, is fully reclaimed. The critic's words, though present, carry no power. The mind thrives in deliberate calm. Internal energy consolidates, and the space once consumed by reactivity is now fertile for mastery and creation.
Socially, patterns shift. Subtle authority emerges. Peers notice composure. Observers respect calmness. Critics lose momentum. Silence becomes the medium of influence. Every encounter, heated debate, casual conversation, or public criticism reinforces mental sovereignty. Presence, not argument, becomes the measure of influence. The world may attempt disruption, but the trained mind remains unshaken, measured, and purposeful. Psychologically, the transformation is profound. Fight or flight triggers weaken. Emotional clarity is automatic. Mental energy is no longer siphoned by external chaos,
but focused on meaningful action. Reactions that once defined you are replaced by observation, strategy, and reflection. Silence is not absence, but power. It is the foundation of authority, clarity, and internal freedom. Philosophy confirms the strategy. Marcus Aurelius emphasized perception as the ultimate frontier of freedom. Those who attempt to provoke cannot succeed without permission. Each moment of unbroken silence asserts control over attention, reinforces internal sovereignty, and expands mental space for deliberate action. Mastery is revealed in how the mind navigates chaos without being consumed by it. By the end of this stage, identity is fully transformed. The mind, disciplined and resilient, operates independently of external validation. Critics lose influence. Emotional stability becomes default. Attention and energy are fully controlled. The final mindset shift crystallizes. True mastery is cultivated through silent observation, deliberate restraint, and the conscious choice of engagement, creating freedom from the turbulence of others' opinions. The final integration begins when silence ceases to be a technique and becomes a natural extension of self. Every thought, action, and reaction is filtered through the lens of deliberate awareness. External provocations, harsh words, criticism, or challenges no longer dictate emotion or attention. Instead, each interaction becomes a mirror, reflecting insight, patterns, and opportunities for strategic observation. The mind, once fragmented by the chaos of external voices, is now unified, calm, and purposeful. Imagine a high-pressure scenario where multiple critics converge simultaneously. In the past, chaos would have spread internally, triggering defensiveness, anxiety, or self-doubt. Now, observation dominates. You note motives, detect insecurities, and recognize projection. The internal dialogue is steady. Their judgments are theirs, not mine. My focus remains my own. The external storm is absorbed as data rather than disruption. Energy once expended on reaction is now preserved, directed toward creative and strategic output. Silence has become an instrument of power. This stage reveals the deep psychological shift. Fight or flight responses are no longer automatic. Emotional clarity becomes default. Mental energy is consolidated, enabling focus, creativity, and deliberate decision-making. Critics' attempts at disruption become predictable and easily managed. Silence is no longer defensive. It is proactive mastery. Every encounter reinforces the identity of composure and authority, producing subtle social influence without verbal assertion. Presence replaces argument. Observation replaces conflict. Energy is fully owned and deployed strategically. Internal monologue evolves into long-term reinforcement. I am the master of my mind, the steward of my attention. External chaos may exist, but it does not control me. Each unspoken response consolidates this philosophy, embedding restraint and deliberation into behavior. Neural pathways strengthen around calm observation, mental clarity, and self-sovereignty. The mind that once reacted impulsively now moves with intention, composed even in turbulent situations. Philosophy remains the guiding compass. Marcus Aurelius taught that true power lies in perception and the internal regulation of emotion. Words, judgment, or criticism cannot penetrate unless granted significance. Every silent moment is an assertion of authority, mental autonomy, and strategic control. Life unfolds with fewer distractions and more clarity, as energy is redirected from reactive cycles toward intentional growth. By the conclusion of this segment, identity is nearly complete. The mind operates independently of external noise. Focus and energy are preserved. Emotional stability becomes habitual. Authority emerges quietly but unmistakably. The final mindset crystallizes. True mastery is silent, deliberate, and intentional. Freedom is the choice of engagement, and power resides in the control of attention, energy, and perception.
The transformation reaches completion when silence and deliberate observation are no longer conscious efforts, but the default state of being. External criticism, social pressure, or attempts to provoke no longer disturb the mind. Energy, once dissipated in reaction, is fully preserved and directed toward creation, reflection, and growth. Your presence, calm and deliberate, communicates authority without words. The critic's influence diminishes, and the world's noise becomes background rather than command. Imagine a day filled with challenges. Colleagues question decisions. Social media invites judgment. Friends offer veiled critiques. Where reaction once scattered focus and energy, observation now dominates. Each interaction is filtered through internal clarity. Thoughts articulate guidance. I respond only where influence exists. I let go of what is not mine to control. Each withheld reaction reinforces sovereignty, strengthens focus, and preserves attention. The mind, once fragmented by chaos, is unified and resilient. Internal dialogue deepens the identity shift. You replay prior encounters, noting how energy was once wasted in reactive cycles. Patterns of projection, insecurity, and ego are now recognized and mentally cataloged. Criticism becomes data for understanding human behavior, not fuel for anxiety. The mind that once reacted impulsively now operates strategically. Emotional clarity and calmness become habitual. Attention and energy, fully owned, are deployed deliberately and effectively. Socially, the shift is perceptible. Authority emerges quietly, respected by colleagues, sensed by peers, and unchallenged by critics. Presence, restraint, and calm influence outcomes more powerfully than any verbal argument. The habitual practice of silence transforms from self-preservation into proactive mastery. Power is expressed not through confrontation, but through unshakable composure and deliberate action. Each interaction reinforces sovereignty and internal freedom. Philosophy anchors the transformation. Marcus Aurelius emphasized the mastery of perception and internal control. External chaos cannot penetrate without consent. Each deliberate pause asserts control over attention, reinforces mental autonomy, and creates the space for clarity, strategy, and personal growth. Freedom, clarity, and authority reside not in controlling the world, but in controlling your mind. By the end of this journey, identity is fully transformed. The mind is resilient, focused, and autonomous. Critics' words no longer dictate emotion or attention. Energy is conserved and strategically applied. Internal authority and composure define your presence. The final mindset emerges. True mastery is deliberate, silent, and strategic. External chaos cannot touch the mind that has chosen restraint, focus, and clarity. Power is the quiet command of attention, energy, and perception. Carry this forward. Observe, restrain, and act with intention. Each day offers the opportunity to reinforce mastery, reclaim energy, and cultivate presence. The critic, the chaos, the noise, they exist, but they do not own you. Your mind, disciplined through silence,